Welcome back to the Unpopular Opinion, Becoming Popular. My name is Yana the Heretic, and this week we are discussing Gate 57, which actually was last week's transit. I was at a wedding in Texas, and unfortunately, although I wrote this out, I couldn't make a video, so my apologies for the tardiness. But it was filtering around October 7th to the 13th, and it was our last gate in Christ consciousness, and the archetype of Christ consciousness. And this is a highly splenic gate. It is actually a part of 4 channels, 4 integration channels is what it's called, and it's the main stem of our splenic center. And our spleen is all about intuitive awareness, and this happens to be the gate of intuitive clarity, and it's called the gentle. So we might have felt very aware of our surroundings, and a lot of sensory things were coming to fruition for us. Maybe the awareness of potential danger. I was in a wedding, first wedding as kind of an adult, and a bridesmaid, and I come from a very liberal state in Washington, and going into Texas, there's always this, before you go somewhere, you have this interpretation of what you're heading into. At least for some people, I just go and fucking figure it out by fucking around, so I find it really interesting, the things that have come up, for me. And at first it was like, oh well, I like to speak my truth. There's not really any moment where I'm not doing that, and that's very much how everyone was. It was actually quite refreshing, because I come from a Russian background, so people don't really tend to be as reserved. They like to share their opinion, they like to share their morals, they like to share their beliefs, and the way they structure their life. And sure, it can be very intense. I've gotten a lot of people saying that, oh well, the way that you talk feels like you're attacking me, but realistically it's just sharing, hey, this is the problem, what are we gonna do about this situation? And no matter how you say it, it's hard to do that, in a liberal place, and there's less passive aggressivity in Texas. So it was really interesting, but I was on guard, and then realized I can totally be safe in my environment. I could totally be cool, because the people that I was around, were complete anomalies, just like I am. And it's that's when you really trust your response to certain things, and it's effective, and you're sweet, it's perfect. Not everything is this constant political debate, so. And that's really what I fucking strive for, because I don't see things the way that people do. I don't go into a situation with my armor, or my spears, or anything. I honestly really don't think about it, because the way that I grew up, oppression was everywhere, so I'm just kind of yeah, whatever, I enjoy people. And that's a little bit of my experience, going into a completely different element, and coming out and being wow, I really appreciated that. And it was really helpful to see, a different way of thinking, a perspective shift, and getting out of my comfort zone. And I know that I'm safe, and it's exactly what this gate is about. It's about, your intuition guiding you to a place, and you making it out, because like you know what to do, you know what to say, you say the right thing, you know. Specifically, this gate, we have the brainwave was filtering in our channels, and when it comes down to the brainwave, it is all about just like saying the right thing at the right time, like in divine timing, or you know, you don't even recognize that from yourself. You just like do it and you're like shocked, you know, that this came out, you know. And even though it created some type of destabilization in your environment, like it was meant to be. Because if we look at this gate, it's an individual gate, and it's one of the two individual gates in the quarter of duality, which, you know, our theme is relationships. And, you know, we've been like so tight knit in the collective, and it's really difficult to be constantly together when you're in a relationship. You need that individuality to really like create differences, to create interest in your relationship. You know, you have to communicate things that are going to change. You have to communicate what you want this change to look like, and how to really respect each other in that relationship. And yes, it requires a lot of communication and understanding, but it is all for the benefit of the foundation between you and these people, you know, whether it's family, business partners, you know, your immediate intimate relationship. So the individual streak really is what makes things work when it comes down to your own personal agency. Because, you know, some people, they go into a relationship and they're considered to be happy, and everything's all like happy, and you know, and then you kind of look at the situation and the way that this person grows throughout time, and they don't really have anything that they've latched onto and like grown from, because they've been almost complacent in their energy. And, you know, this like kind of surface level happiness doesn't really provide them with like sustenance necessarily, because it is the norm. Nothing different is going on. Whereas in a relationship where somebody has goals that will affect the relationship, like potentially moving to a different state to learn something, or, you know, travel or go on tour, for example, like you're going to need a lot of like trust and preparation for these things. And that requires a lot of depth, a lot of flexibility, and knowing where the boundaries lie in your relationship. So, you know, and including in like a business, like if somebody wants to go off for like a month or 5, you know, it's like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, and I require this amount of time to be able to like live and breathe and come back with new fresh eyes and be able to work. And that's really what agency is, you know. And all the splenic beings, like they have their own personal agency for sure, because, you know, they're all like, yeah, I know that's good for me, and I know that isn't good for me. You know, individuals are really hard to phase. Like this is specifically the gate of the right ear, and, you know, gate 57s, they hear what they think is interesting, and honestly they hear if there is a potential threat in their environment. So because there is a fear present for this gate, and that comes from our lymphatic system, that comes from our T cells. You know, we're always like sensing something. If you're a splenic in any way, especially 57, you're always sensing and tasting and hearing it takes a lot of energy, a lot of sensory energy, because there is in the background this fear that, you know, potentially like, well, I'm going to protect myself from this situation and I know what to do. I'll like get out of the way, or I will, you know, make sure to duck or whatever, you know, or this is the fear of the future, really. You know, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go out and say this, but what is it gonna do? You know, is it going to create too much of a boundary between us? Is it going to be too much for the other person, you know? And sometimes, yeah, you say too much. It comes out of you and you're like, oh shit, like, we're gonna break up, or, you know, stuff like that. So it's important to really know how to get yourself to the next step. And, you know, this is all about really knowing, like, what's good for you individually. Because even if you, like I said, you know, you say the wrong thing, you know, the potential to move forward, you have to get through that fear. You know, even if you say something, you're gonna have to get yourself out of that situation. And yeah, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, things move forward, things move on, and sometimes you say something and there's a break, you know. But love persists. So this is the signaling you get if there's a threat and how to deal with it appropriately. So but yeah, these individuals, it's also the gate of deafness, because, you know, individuals aren't phased, so they hear what they want, and then all the rest kind of gets muffled, you know, and it's just a natural symbiotic thing that happens. Yeah. People transform a lot, and I had mentioned that, and like, when you're fully safe in a situation, it creates this kind of toxic merge, this codependency, you know, you don't even realize it, but it does relate to stagnancy. So that's ultimately the thing that you are avoiding here, is like being so reserved in your safety that you can't really like explain yourself. You can't really like create room for yourself, because you're just so like, I'm, you know, like, safety is everything, and I don't know really how to break free and be myself and still be safe, you know. But it is absolutely necessary, and a lot of the times, like, people will naturally break free from those things because they just blurt it out, you know, and it causes things to move and shake up their environment. I had mentioned in Jungian psychology, I read something super interesting about projection, and how like that comes from our unconscious, you know, and if we feel stagnant and like overly like coddled or safe, you know, for a prolonged period of time, it really creates this projection, you know, onto your partner, and a shadow almost of like, oh, well, you know, you're doing this, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's really coming from a place of your own inadequacy. And it gets really toxic until you can really break those unconscious chains, like, and move forward and get charged up, again, as like a polar being, like your own electrical polar being. And that's when things like really start to unite, because then the toxicity of like one being super charged up will eventually kind of like neutralize everything and make it feel like nothing's ever different. You're not really two power beings, if one is taking care of certain things, like maybe try out swapping those roles if possible, because that will ignite things. Like typically people are charged up by their partner and they're focused on it. In a lot of like esoteric and occult symbolism or alchemical symbolism, there's arrows. And that's another reason why, we're so interested on certain things, like because an arrow symbolizes our focus or our libido. So typically, like you focus so much about the other person or your business, that you constantly have new energy flowing into it. Like you're curious, you're aware, you want to help them, you want to watch this person succeed alongside you. It can get obsessive, of course. We've seen that before, where you don't know what to do with yourself. You're always focused on the other. But just knowing that you're charged up by, this person you're with, that is extremely like potent energy, and that'll always, get you through. Really get you to that eros, in your relationship. Obviously, 57 is about also like depicting like what way you respond, because like if you have, a sacral or emotional or just splenic, you're always kind of responding intuitively, and just being aware of those things is highly important, because you can, even though you won't recognize your own splenic thing, that you're that you're exuding, but you can hear it come from your body. You can hear your grunts or your sighs or your like shock, or you're gonna be emotional about it. You're gonna hit, like something's gonna hit, or you're gonna feel something like sensory, like, oh shit, that feels like a lie, it feels like weird. So you don't always have to respond, to the threat in the environment. You can be quiet, you can be silent, and just kind of slip away between the cracks. Like that's a reality for a lot of 57s as well. It just depends on the situation, and things are moving around you, especially during this transit. Things are changing. Like maybe your plans changed abruptly because, you just had a gut feeling, or you had like this weird like wave of intuition. Maybe it was like a voice, who knows, like how it comes through you specifically. Or a weird taste, it's like, that's how it comes through, really. So being able to pay attention and be like, actually, I'm going to change those plans. I'm going to like wait it out and see. Like if you experience that, that was like probably really cool to go back and be like, yeah, I was right. I was like not the week to do this. So having gate 34, which is the gate of power, it's considered the power of the great, which is one of the integration channels that's coming from the sacral center. Having this gate is very beneficial for gate 57 because it allows you to actually respond to the environment. A lot of the time 57s like feel the thing, but they don't know what to do about it. You know, they're just like, oh, like I'm just gonna keep this to myself and slip away, like I had mentioned. But gate 34 helps to suppress the fear of like I need to survive, and it allows for action to move when danger is present. So it allows you to not get paralyzed by the situation and allows you to move, you know, because you need to move the fuck out of the way, dude, you know. But in reality, like you're always like in a way speaking that truth, you know. It's like this was specifically in the knowing circuit, so you're getting stuff that you know is true, you know. It doesn't mean you need to act on it, but at least it's in your head, and you know that you're gonna avoid that situation even though nobody else knows that you will. Generally, if you, even if you don't have gate 34, you learn to trust, you know, your body's reaction. You know how to depict it after years of practicing. You're gonna start developing this spiritual sense. It's almost like a psychic thing. This is the most psychic of gates. So it will ultimately be the mystical guiding force that like fulfills our equilibrium on this plane or other planes, who knows. This is like the like seasonal changes in like animals where they know when to migrate, or they know, oh, a storm is coming and I should find shelter. So typically those humans that naturally know to do that, or test the water before you go in, or, you know, get to know things in the environment, like this is a poisonous spider, this is what you need to look out for. Those are the beings that have a spleen, and you can certainly tell. So if you do this naturally, good on you. Getting to know if you have this gate is very, very cool. And I want to know what happened to you last week. I want to know if there's any like mystical things you guys want to share or talk about that have changed, that have put you on a different track. I'm always down to hear it. You can message me personally or DM, or, you know, write it in the contacts and share experiences. It's always really interesting and fun. And for the questions of the week, we have, do you believe that monotheism reaches towards polytheism and vice versa? Now, this is kind of like more the Christ consciousness sort of question, because you're like, what the fuck is this about? But is universal energy or God the tree, and its branches are the archetypes? So meaning like perhaps you're in a place where they have different beliefs and they believe in monotheism, and you're like, okay, well, I can at least like relate to that because, you know, typically I myself, like, I can be a singular type of person, but then there's other moments where I'm like, okay, like I like to experience other roles, you know, there's other characteristics to who I am, and I am a different archetype. So is that typically how you see it? Because it seems like the very core of these theologies is that they're almost like a cone where you go as deep into the cone at the point, and then it kind of like turns back into the exit again. It's like walking through a portal, and then it like bouncing you back, you know. So it's interesting to think about it like that. How do you keep up with your agency hygiene? Do you believe that other people, do you believe what other people believe to promote safety in your environment? So do you pretend? Do you know when to pretend to get yourself out of a tricky situation? Or do you typically just know what to say to just like be like, yeah, well, I'm me, but you know, that's still okay. How can you branch out from the normality in your life where you feel a lack of definition from yourself or the other? Meaning like, you know, once you've merged with somebody, like where is the definition between you and them? And is it really possible to locate it? How has individuality helped love the people around you because they are different? Where does the line get drawn, and how flexible is this boundary? You know, there's tons of segregation now, you know, and I honestly like love comedy for that reason, because I have a lot of comedy in my arsenal that like breaks those opinions that are heavy, that are dark, that we see creating a lot of war right now. So that is my suggestion for you, is like really like look at these questions and, you know, find some interesting comedy that breaks ground, you know, because once you talk to these people and you're open to doing that, like it requires a lot of self-control, but not only that, it makes you not stupid, you know. Like I think that people like tend to think they know what's going on, and they can't put themselves in other people's shoes at all, and they claim to know, but they don't claim to understand at all. And I think we'd get a lot of more perspective if we try to engage more and be okay with that, and be okay with safety, and come from a neutral place of just listening and, you know, observing. Is there anything here that, you know, could be a problem, you know? How has your intuition sparked your interest this week? What truths have surprised you that have come up from within? Thanks, guys. It's been a potent week. Next week, we have a different archetype, and we are going to be in the Gate of Continuity, Gate 32. Make sure to check it out. Thank you for watching.